Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to talk about my OPUS BT-C3400 battery charger. I got the charger back in 2016, back when I started harvesting 18650 lithium-ion cells from laptop batteries. I started harvesting them to power some flashlights that I recently had gotten, and I needed a decent battery charger to charge them with. And I wasn't going to settle for some cheap-in piece of garbage straight from Hong Kong that may overcharge the battery, or essentially I wanted a charger that was smart, had the all the good protections in place, and also had additional functionality such as charge tests and things like that. So I picked this up on Amazon for I believe $54 at the time. I don't know what today's cost is for this thing, but this charger has done me very well over the years. It's held up very well. Because let's say, back in 2016, at first I started doing 18650s for flashlights, but later I decided, hey, I'm going to start running my cameras off of these things. So I did the 18650 mod on this video camera right here, the Kodak Play Touch. This is the first one I ever did. Now I did redo this pretty recently. I did replace the box and do a couple of things to it, but anyways, that was the first camera I did the 18650 mod to, and in recent years I've 18650 modded the Cube Comp MTDX weather case cameras, the camera you're watching this video through right now, just an example. So I was regularly needing to recharge 18650s. So this thing gets a whole lot of use, and again, it's held up very well over its course of time. What I like about this charger is it can charge not only 18650s, but also it can charge double A's and triple A's. So if I'm going to go on vacation and I have some double A's I need to recharge or whatnot, this one here will do it. Now, for the most part, I use my PowerX or Maha C9000 Wizard 1 charger for charging my double A's, nickel metal hydride cells. But this here is used for recharging my 18650s. And we're going to look at the back again. Now I'm covering something up because I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is all the different kinds of batteries this thing can recharge. So, there you go. Now what's funny about this charger is it has some functionality that the manual does not mention of. There's no mention of this functionality on, let's say, Amazon's description of it, or nothing like that. So I think it was last year or year before, I got my hands on some 4.35 volt lithium-ion cells that come out of a Dell laptop battery. Matter of fact, one of them is right here. I'll show it to you. It's a 3000 milliamp hour cell that, instead of having the maximum voltage of 4.2 volts, as you commonly get with lithium-ion chemistry, this one, we can get a close-up of that model. This one, instead, terminates at 4.35 volts. So I was like, oh man, I'm going to go out and buy a different charger. Well, lo and behold, I looked up online, and people were saying that these BT-C3400 chargers, the 3100 chargers, offer a hidden switch on the actual circuit board to where you can switch the termination voltage from 4.2 volts, which is the factory set, to 4.35 volts. And lo and behold, inside this charger is a switch that reads out 3.7, 4.35, 4.2. Again, the factory default is 4.2. However, you can switch over to 4.35 and charge the 4.35 volt cells. And I think the 3.7 in there is actually for lithium iron phosphate, because I think they run at a lower voltage than regular lithium ion. But yeah, you can see I drilled a hole in the bottom of this charger to access the switch. Which, mind you, the switch can be utilized with the charger plugged in. So let's say there's no batteries in the charger, and I'm going to, let's say I discharge up some 4.2 volt cells. I want to charge up some 4.35 volt cells. All I got to do is just turn it over, pop the switch over to 4.35, load in some cells, and charge them up to 4.35 volts. Now this comes to an issue that I'm concerned about with this design. And maybe perhaps is why they hidden the switch inside the charger. You know, for example, I have a lot of 4.2 volt cells plus those 4.35 volt cells. I have this little card here that I try to use. Anytime I have this thing set to 4.35 volts, I put a little warning tag in front of the charger or beside it, somewhere I can see nearby. And let's face it, there was a time, pretty recent, that I was charging up some batteries. I loaded into 4.2 volt cells. I forgot to switch it back from 4.35 to 4.2. Well, luckily the cells hadn't got nearly full charge yet. But that's a concern, because if you accidentally overcharge 4.35 volt cells, people online are saying it'll lower the service life of the cell. Some people say your cells will explode. That's not a very good. That's not a very good thought. So yeah, I think a better approach to the 4.35 volt capability would be to have maybe a fifth button that when you load in the cells, you would select the voltage. It would default to 4.2, for example, and you would actually have to manually select up to 4.35. Some sort of little safeguard. Now there are other 18650 chargers out there, smart chargers, that have a switch on the back, like in this area for 4.2, 4.35, and so on and so forth. But it's something you have to be careful with when you're charging cells and you have both 4.2 volt and 4.35 volt cells on hand. You have to make sure that you have the right voltage selected. And I try to make sure that every time now that when I load in my cells, before I load in my cells, I check the switch and make sure it's set to the proper voltage. Now, if you load in some 4.35 volt cells and you forget to switch it over to 4.35 volts, it's not a big deal. Your cells won't get fully charged. But if it's the other way around, yeah, it can be pretty bad. Okay, so now I'll do a little demonstration of the charger. One thing I'm going to demonstrate is the mode. Let's see if we can select it here. Without any cells inserted, you can actually change the mode. Right now it's set to charge. You have discharge, discharge refresh, charge test, and quick test. So charge is, of course, you know what that is. It charges up the batteries. Discharge, it discharges them down to about 2.9 to 3 volts in the case of lithium ion. Discharge refresh supposedly can refresh a bad cell. Now this I think is better for nickel metal hydride and nickel cadmium. Not sure about lithium ion. You have charge test. This will it's either it discharges the cell, or actually I think it charges it fully first and then discharges it down, and I think recharges it, and it tells you what the capacity of the cell is. And you also have quick test. And what this does is it will check for the internal resistance of the cells that you load in. And it displays a number, up to a 3-digit number. So again, a number that it displays, I think is in milliohms. I think it's in a smaller form of resistance. I'd have to look at the manual to know for sure. And I don't have a manual right now on hand, so anyways, what we'll do is we're going to pop in these cells and we'll check the internal resistance of them. You just leave it in there for a moment and it will check. They weren't seated very well. Let's try it again. No idea why these are reporting such weird numbers. Now these are correct, but Make sure they're well seated in there. Now, from what I remember, I think a value of around 200 or less is okay. These cells do have quite a bit of cycles on them. Again, the manual has all that information, and it's a very, very well detailed manual. So, if you're not familiar with this thing at all, I'd recommend taking a look at it. But here's the thing about the charger I can't exactly stand. Is that very noisy little fan that seems to move very little air. Almost like, why is it even there to begin with? For those who watch my videos real often, you may recognize that noise. That's what you're hearing. You're hearing this little bitty fan in the back of this charger, humming away. Because as I mentioned, I regularly use this thing. Especially during the summertime when I'm doing thunderstorm videos and stuff for QComp MTDX. Again, my weather case cameras, like for example, this is one of the weather case cameras, run on 18650s. I have them 18650 modded. See, there you go. So there's some times where this thing gets used daily to recharge my cells, for my flashlights, for my cameras. So it does get pretty commonly used. And this fan, which the manual tells you about the fan, and even displays the temperature curve, I do think it tells you the temperature that comes on and whatnot. And this temperature applies to the charger itself, or the temperature of the cells, any individual cell. So, yeah, it is kind of annoying to hear. And of course, we just did the quick test, which involves putting a dummy load on the cells through resistors, so that generates heat, and that's why the little fan comes on. So this fan is the worst when you're discharging cells, because obviously you're putting a big load on the cells, and all that energy gets wasted as heat, and that fan helps dissipate the heat. And it just moves just a slight bit of air, not a whole lot of air. Not for the amount of noise it makes, but other than that, I'm relatively pleased with this thing. It has held up quite well for the amount of use that's gotten. Yeah, if I haven't cycled through all the modes yet, let's go ahead and do that. So again, we have charge, discharge refresh, charge test, and quick test. This charger reminds me a lot of my lacrosse charger. The lacrosse technologies charger I used to use regular for charging my AA's and AAA's. That's what this reminds me of. It's like a giant version of that. It has the individual readouts for all 4 banks, and has very similarly named modes, and all that good stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is set to 4.2, which it is. Make sure it switches all the way up, and it is. So it's set to charge. I'm going to load in a couple of cells. And what this will do is it will default to 500 milliamps. You can change that from 200, 300, 500, 700 to 1,000 milliamps. I'll cycle to that again. I'm going to let it start charging. And as it charges, it will actually tell you the amount of current going into the cells. And this number will vary from like 980 to 1020, just for example. You can see it's varying around just a little bit. And since lithium-ion batteries charge on a constant current, constant voltage, style charge, the charger will deliver 1 amp to the cells, and once they get up to about 4.05 to 4.1, it will start to dial down to down to like 100 milliamps or so until the batteries reach 4.2 in the case you're charging 4.2 volt cells. Another thing this charger is good at, let's say if you have some well over discharged cells, let's say if you harvest some out of a laptop battery and they're sitting at like 2.5 or something like that, and you set this thing to go at 1000 milliamps, it will not put in 1000 milliamps. It will automatically walk down to like, for example, the lowest voltage cells I ever put into this thing were some Panasonics out of an old Dell pack back in 2016, and when I stuck those in, they were like 1.7, 1.8 volts, and two of them were like 2.3 or 2.5. And with the lesser charged cells, what it did was it walked down to like 50 milliamps until the cells got to about 2.5 to 3 volts. Yeah, 3 volts actually about there, and then it increased the current. So that way, because essentially lithium-ion batteries, when they're almost completely dead, if you put a bunch of current in them, you can actually short them out. So the charger is good at gently waking cells back up. Now, this is not a practice I recommend. If your cells are below 2.2 or so, or 2 volts minimum, I just say recycle them. Yes, you can actually get them to come back, but you have a somewhat elevated risk of the cells becoming unstable, and also the capacity of those cells is going to be very low. It's just the Panasonic cells I mentioned all of them were like putting out less than, some were barely doing 1000 milliamp hours when they're rated for like 2150. So yeah, that's why they got recycled, and that's when I harvest these out of a Toshiba pack. These are actually doing almost about the rated capacity. They charge up to, sometimes 2000, 2100, and that's not bad considering how much use they've gotten. They've gotten a lot of use since I harvested them. And same goes for these light blue cells here, these generics. So overall, it's a fantastic charger with a couple of little minor quirks. Again, the fan is kind of noisy, and also it's like, why did they hide this functionality here? How come did they not bring it out front and make it into a design to where it's, I guess, safer to use, to where it defaults to 4.2 and you have to make a certain special keystroke to go to 4.35. This is my opinion. Actually, that was a YouTube commenter's opinion on one of my previous videos about this charger. I think it's a really good point. They mentioned that by default, you stick the cells in, it should default to like 4.2, and then you have to press a button and get it to go to 4.35. But I think if you're running, let's say if you're running 4.35 volt cells and 4.2 volt cells, you definitely have to pay close attention. I mean, this right here is a good example of how to remind yourself to check the thing. You gotta check it pretty much every time now. So anytime I load and install this thing, I check and make sure it's at 4.2 for 4.2 volt cells, or 4.35 volt cells. I make sure it's set to 4.35. Now, if I didn't mention already, if you load in 4.35 volt cells and forget to set it to 4.35, oh, big whoop. The cells won't fully charge. But if it's the other way around, it could be hazardous. So I gotta be careful. But anyways, again, fantastic charger, has held up very well over the years. Again, about 2 years or so of pretty hard use. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well guys, that's it for this one. But it doesn't have to be. There's plenty more videos on the channel to check out. Also, if you liked the video, please click the like button. And if you absolutely hated it, there is the alternative button as well. But yeah, please subscribe to the channel. I definitely appreciate it. And remember to click the bell so that we get notified of all updates. Also, if you're interested in things aside from computers and technology, check out my second channel. It's CubeComp MTDX. Over there you'll find videos about weather, elevators, bicycling, and pretty much whatever else I figure out to upload. So yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you for your support.